Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the Daily Debate. I'm your host for tonight, Mohammed Abdurrahim. Naturally, we'll be talking about the US-Israel-Iran war or truce at the moment and the efforts to try and de-escalate tension here in the region and bring an end to this war. We'll be focusing on Egypt's mediation earlier on Monday, His Excellency President Al-Sisi received the Russian President's top aide and also the responsible person for maritime navigation in the Russian Federation. Also, the President met with Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdulati, who held a series of very important phone calls, including with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, with the US envoy Steve Witkoff, and with the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, and with the Pakistani Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar. Of course, Pakistan is leading the mediation efforts along with Egypt, Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Also, there were phone calls for Dr. Abdulati with the Saudi Foreign Minister and also the Qatari and Bahraini Foreign Ministers. A lot is happening. The US President is to meet with his national security team to discuss the latest decisions that are to be made regarding the stalemate at the moment. We know that Iran has proposed delaying negotiations about its nuclear file, and it has offered to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in return for the lifting of the blockade on its ports. That's an Iranian offer. We'll see how the Americans respond to that. The Iranian Foreign Minister, who visited Oman a couple of days ago, is now in Russia, meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and we'll see what the Russians can do here as well. And the Chinese have warned today that they do not like at all the sanctions that have been imposed on some Chinese oil companies being accused of allegedly dealing with Iranian companies. Of course, the US leading these efforts. So we'll be talking the US-Iran, US-Israel-Iran war and the mediation efforts, and also we'll be if we have time, we'll be talking about the situation in Lebanon, a very, very serious situation regarding that Israeli-Lebanese ceasefire there, as Israel continues every day to violate the ceasefire, and today, this Monday, not only hitting southern Lebanon, but hitting Al-Baqa area as well. A shaky ceasefire there. First, to our top stories of the day. His Excellency President Al-Sisi led the funeral procession of late General Kamal Madbouli, the father of the Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, at Field Marshal Tantawi's Mosque in New Cairo on Monday. The President extended his condolences to the Prime Minister and to his family, praying to Allah the Almighty to bless the soul of the late Kamal Madbouli and bestow patience and solace upon his family. Also on Monday, President Al-Sisi urged to continue intensify coordination with friendly countries to settle crises in the region and avoid more escalation. The President said that Egypt strongly rejects any attacks on Arab countries, reiterating the state's firm stance on preserving sovereignty, peace and stability in the entire region. The President made these remarks in a meeting with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The head of state also directed to provide all sorts of care to Egyptian communities abroad, reaffirming keenness on promoting consular services through digital transformation for Egyptian nationals. Also on Monday, President Al-Sisi held a phone call with his Kenyan counterpart William Ruto. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Mohammed Al-Shenawi said the phone talks highlighted proceeding to solidify joint efforts in domains of mutual concern, particularly regarding the economic, commercial and investment spheres. Al-Shenawi also said that the call touched on the Nile water file and cooperation opportunities among Nile basin countries, and also touched on Sudan, where Egypt reaffirmed its firm stance backing an end to human rights violations in Sudan and supporting Sudan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Also on Monday, President Sisi hailed the growing momentum in Egypt's bilateral relations with Russia, notably in terms of trade and joint ventures such as the Daba nuclear power plant and the Russian industrial area in the Suez Canal economic zone. The remarks came as the president received the Russian president's top aide, Nikolai Patrushev, who's also a chairman of the Russian Maritime Navigation Council, and the accompanying delegation. The presidential spokesman said President Sisi expressed high esteem of the Egyptian-Russian strategic partnership and expressed his appreciation of President Vladimir Putin. For his part, the Russian official conveyed President Putin's regards to President Sisi and said the visit was part of Russia's interest in joint cooperation with Egypt to activate their partnership and implement accords made during their reciprocal visits by the leaders of both countries. The meeting tackled both existing and proposed joint projects between Egypt and Russia and possible cooperation mainly in maritime navigation. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs also on Monday said he appreciated the strategic partnership between Egypt and Russia. The top diplomat made the remarks in the meeting with the Russian president's top aide, Nikolai Patrushev, where they discussed enhancing bilateral cooperation based on such a partnership. The two sides also exchanged points of views regarding the unfolding conditions in the Middle East, with Dr. Abdulati saying that the optimal means to avoid a wider conflict is through diplomatic solutions, particularly amidst the global economic volatility. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs on Monday also stressed the importance of continuing negotiations over ending the Iranian conflict and avoiding escalation in the region. The top diplomat made these remarks as he received a phone call from U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, during which they assessed the U.S.-Iranian negotiating path and the new proposals seeking to strike a deal among the conflicting parties. Abdulati asserted that talks are the optimal means of enhancing regional security and stability, calling for resumption of the U.S.-Iranian talks to cement the current ceasefire and permanently bring an end to the war. He added that Egypt will pursue peaceful settlements to the current crises in coordination with regional and international partners to stabilize the entire region.